When I hear people talk about juggling or the sacrifices they make for their children, I look at them like they're crazy because sacrifice infers that there was something better to be doing than being with your children. Being with my kids is the best thing, most fun thing. It's a privilege. It's not something I call a sacrifice. Chris Rock. This is Dadography, a podcast with stories and insights on fatherhood from dads around the globe, dedicated to providing you with the tools and tips to become a better dad. I'm your host, Curacao. Welcome to the Dadography podcast. Today we have a special guest, and his name is Errol Cova. Errol is speaking to us today from Curaçao in Southern Caribbean, about 40 miles north of Venezuela, if you're a geography fan. And Errol, welcome to the show, man. How you doing, brother?
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. Doing pretty good. You know, in the Caribbean, it's always a 90% paradise. So yes, we cannot complain. Happy to share with you and your fans about the experiences of being a dad.
I appreciate you coming on. Honored that you would lay aside some time to speak to myself and our listeners. And let's jump right into it, man. What was your father like?
I came from a very large family. I have 6 siblings, of which 5 were sisters. So my dad was, kind of a principled, very strict dad. I would always say that my dad was a general type of, dad, enforcer of discipline, hard work, education. Everything had to be, a certain way. And his belief system in, discipline and education were very strong. So yes, strict. Again, having a large family and a lot of sisters, and he himself being part of a large family, immigrant family, very strict dad. So basically I got, that education from my dad. So yes, very present in my life. I couldn't have asked for a better dad.
Sounds like it was a very impressionable time in that he was strict, but at the same time, you said that you could not imagine not having him in your life.
That is still my best friend. So yes, we have grown together.
Nice, man. Nice. So I'm going to take a step back a little bit. I was very intentional. I was hoping to kind of catch you off guard a little bit there. But so let's go back now. So give me a little bit about you, man.
I'm 46. I have 5 kids, and all boys, 3 biological boys and 2 non-biological boys, ages from the 22 to 14. My eldest son is in 3rd year medical school. My youngest boy is in 3rd grade high school. So basically, you get a feeling that I started young, not as young maybe as you, Corey, but I started young and I grew with my older boy. So I learned to be a dad basically by growing up and maturing alongside my son.
Okay. So 5 kids, 3 biological, 2 non-biological. Are you married?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And what's your profession?
I work at the central bank. I have, a degree in economics and international business. I've been working at the central bank for the past 23 years. And yes, basically very career-minded person, yet I dedicate a lot of time with my boys and other boys, being a father figure for a lot of boys. I have a baseball team, 150 guys being part of my baseball family. So basically I try to father, all of them in a way to making a difference in their lives.
That's good. We're going to touch on that later because it sounds like you're dedicated to being a father to your children, but it also sounds like you've extended your wings, as it were, to reach out to some other kids as well. So let me ask you this. You mentioned your father, very strict disciplinarian. You have 5 sisters, the only boy. I can imagine that there's probably a little bit more weight on the discipline as it relates to you if you've got 5 sisters, right? So I'm trying to get a feel for what you were experiencing. How would you rate how similar your fatherhood style is to his?
Well, I have to say, if you ask my boys now, in this modern time, if you ask them, they would tell you that you could chill a little bit more. So, I have similar qualities like my dad. I love discipline. I love, principles, good foundations of norms and values. I love men that work hard, be passionate about what you're doing, and wake up early and go out and work hard and, achieve the things that you have in mind and go after your objectives. So yes, I have a similar foundation with the difference that I've tried because the times have changed. The world has changed. The challenges that kids now face are, I think, different than the challenges that we faced back then. So I've tried to soften the enforcer approach of things. So I think I'm strict, but yet the way of enforcing the values in my sons is a bit different, and it might have to do with the fact that I only have sons, and I've gone through a lot of challenges myself, being from a small island, leaving the island and traveling the world, studying abroad, like many of our kids do. One very important part of education of my kids is make your kids be as resilient as possible. So at one point, they have to face all of those challenges themselves. They have to be independent. So how can I instill values in them, but still make them independent, sufficient to be facing their own things when they, go abroad and study and gather degrees and basically choose their life paths.
So it's one thing for them to be able to face the challenges when they grow abroad, but let's back up just a little bit. So you live on an island, and my thought is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, probably one of the major financial bases for that island would be tourism. So usually with tourism, there's a lot of nightlife, partying, hanging out. Do you think that you've faced some specifically unique challenges as it relates to that?
Of course, on one side, there are definitely advantages of growing up on an island, the family life, you have the very close knit community feel. But you already mentioned some other challenges. Being a very important part of our economic activity comes from tourism, having a lot of different types of activities on island, interactions with tourism, tourists. With nightlife comes alcohol consumption and everything related to nightlife. My approach to parenting has always been trying to talk to my kids, okay? Because I have sons, so I cannot limit them to do everything. So basically, I have to explain and keep explaining about alcohol, about drugs, about pregnancy, about STDs, about all of those things that maybe back then when I was young, I was not properly informed about all of that. So I have tried to, since young, starting to explain them, about all those challenges. Not only women face, but we face as men, young men, our different set of challenges. So for me, it was all about communication, all about being open with my sons, all about explaining and underscoring and basically trying to make them aware. So creating awareness of, okay, I'm not going to be there 24/7, but at least I'll give you all the information that you need, the tools that you need, so you can make your own decisions. So basically, as I said, I'm very into sports. So my kids are very into sports as well. So thank God that's one of the things that keep them off things like booze.
Okay, so you've got 5 boys. You've had to have conversations with them as it relates to the night. How old are your boys? You say from between 14 and 22. So let's go from 22. What's your middle boy? How old is he?
He's 17.
Okay, so let's go from 17 to 22. All right. So now these 3 older boys, you've had to have said, hey, listen, there's drugs on the island, there's alcohol on the island, parties are pretty live. Take me through one of the conversations with either one, and it doesn't have to be verbatim, but just kind of give me a sense of what it feels like to be in the room while you're explaining to your son either one of these topics.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to back up even more because my conversations started before they turned basically 15, 16, and 17. And as I already alluded to, I basically was trained on the job with my eldest son. So with my second, third, and the rest of the guys, I started talking and communicating more easily than the first one. We are very social persons, so we like to help, we like to be involved in our communities. And
excuse me, let me interject. When you say that you're very social persons, you mean in regards to the island culture itself, and so it tends to be very social?
no, I mean personally, but the island culture is social. And basically, what I meant by being social is we are very active in trying to help assist other people that have less. So my boys were from young, they were exposed to different types of things. For example, helping drug addicts, recover and stuff like that. So every time we used to see a drug addict or someone being drunk, walking down the streets, doing things that they should not be doing, I have used those moments to basically start or keep educating my guys. Okay, so this is what they are doing. Okay, they are doing this because they are drunk or they are under the influence of drugs. These are the consequences of consuming drugs and consuming unlimited alcohol. Basically that's the way my approach was. So to use moments that we have encountered, and those moments open up how to say the conversation lines, how to talk about alcohol, how to talk about drugs, what not to do, what. Yes.
Sounds like you took a very matter of fact approach when speaking with them. So it wasn't the typical maybe birds and bees conversation as it's often referred to. Maybe you would have a conversation with them that kind of specifically outlines, hey, listen, sexual relations are this way or drugs are this way. It sounds like you were very direct.
Exactly. I always try to be direct, to be clear, to be transparent, and tell them, basically reasoning with my boys. Okay, this is what I think. This is why I think this way I'm thinking. This is what I want you to bear in mind. Okay, so basically, I'm not forcing them to think the way I'm thinking. I'm just giving them the materials for themselves to form their own opinion of, okay, I don't want to do drugs. I don't want to drink. And if I drink, this is the way I'll do it. I will always tell them those are the effects of doing this. Okay, this is the way I think about it. And basically knowing that at one point in their lives, they will go off island to be independent. At least they have that baggage of information that I have provided. And at least they have my view and my minimum requirements on those things. Basically, things that I want to see them do. And it's not easy. It's not easy, to be very honest, sitting down, even with sons. So, being father of sons, people tend to think it's easy for us to just call my son, for example, one of my sons, come here and sit in front of me. Okay, how many girlfriends do you have? We celebrate this or we don't do this. It's not easy. There's still the barrier of being father. There's still the barrier of my sons wanting to, try things. Okay, so it's always a challenge, but you have to do this. We have to be open. We have to keep talking, even sometimes they don't want to listen to what we want to say or we have to say. But I think on a long term, the voices, advices, the suggestions, the approach, all of that will pop up one day and be useful to them. And one of the most important things when talking a lot is being the example. So I cannot talk left and act right. And I cannot talk south and act north. So basically, we have to be able, as dads, we have to walk our talks. So my son has to understand what I'm talking by seeing how I conduct myself. So a very important part of being a dad is making sure that what you instill in your sons, you yourself are doing.
Hey guys, this is Corey, host of the Dadography podcast. This episode is sponsored by and dedicated to you. Thanks for all your feedback and support. I mean that. However, if this is your first time tuning in, please be sure to subscribe. And if you've done that already and you're getting some value from our interviews with dads from around the globe, please share. Teamwork makes a dream work. Now back to the show. That makes sense, man. I can see you're passionate about this thing too, Errol, for sure. And I appreciate all of the insight and advice that you're giving. You know, it's things I can implement for myself, and I'm sure that the listeners will appreciate. It sounds like you definitely have had some uniquely, I don't know if they're uniquely Curaçao issues as much as they are uniquely just island issues and challenges, especially if there's a lot of tourism. But it seems like you have a very, very direct, very head-to-head approach, which I think is great. So what languages are spoken in Curaçao?
Most of us, our educational system, the Dutch educational system, so multi-language. And I know because we are very touristic and we are very close to South America and very heavy Spanish influence. So we speak multiple languages. So first, our native language is called Papiamento. So we all speak Papiamento. And then when you're at school, you have to.
Could you give me an example in Papiamento of, hi, how are you today? Good to see you.
Okay, sí, bom dia, conta Cuba, contento de mirabo.
Thank you.
That's Papiamento. And then at school, our school system is based on Dutch. So we learn Dutch as well. And then English is also taught at school, but nowadays with internet, with the access on the social media, all those kids speak English. So English, Dutch, Papiamento, and a lot of Spanish is spoken. So everybody at least speaks those four languages. And depending upon your ethnicity, you may be speaking Portuguese or French or other languages. So basically, most of us speak four languages.
Wow. And it's as a result of a little bit of school and then at home and then just the environment in and of itself.
Exactly. It's a result of, multiple factors that has led our island to be multilingual.
What are you thinking in terms of the long-term benefits for your children speaking several different languages? You see it as a plus, as something that's just happened as a result of being on the island, or what are your thoughts?
Yes, it happened as partly as a result of being on the island. I'm very thankful of my lifestyle. We have traveled a lot, so they have been exposed to the Spanish, the English, the Dutch, the French. And so speaking more than one languages and being able to speak English, Spanish, the way we do it is definitely a plus. I try to make my kids resilient, and your ability to, basically being understood all over the world, because you speak either English or Spanish, that's already half the battle won. So yes, it's a plus. I work at the central bank, and the ability to speak more than one language has allowed me to form the network of international friends. And it gives you the ability to communicate, to make friends, to explore, to work in different environments with different people, using different languages. And the real advantage of this is we can switch from Papiamento to English to Spanish to Dutch, without even thinking about, okay, I'm going to switch. It's just part of us. So it makes you very usable. It's a real professional asset and a real personal asset to be able to speak so many languages. So yes, it's definitely a plus, and I wouldn't change. I think maybe we should even try to learn more languages.
Yeah, I think we are definitely more and more a global culture. There was a time when something happened on the far side of the planet, and maybe you hear about it a year or so later. Maybe you catch that particular episode of the news. But now it's nothing to go out. Even in the West or in the States, it's not a challenging thing to go outside and meet somebody from a different part of the world. I mean, we have really become a global planet, and it sounds like you've been perfectly positioned with your children to learn multiple languages. Let's say, for example, we've got a dad listening in, I don't know, Midwest in the United States of America. Not a whole lot of cultural diversity there. To that dad, you would encourage him to do what, Errol?
Yes, we tend, everybody, even in Curacao, we tend to make our little space our universe. And we tend to think that the only thing we need is what we have right here in Curacao or right here in the Midwest. But it's not like that. The more diverse, the more inclusive, the more resilient, the more adaptable, the more flexible you are, the more open you are to learning new things, to learning new cultures, to meeting people, the more opportunities open up. So I would say is create nice internal foundations and use that internal foundation, that platform that you have, and explore what's out there. Because at the end of the day, we are so interconnected, and if we're not able to understand the dynamics of different cultures and different needs and different wants, at the end of the day, you're going to be standing alone, and you don't want that. I think as a global citizen, we need to be cognizant that it's not the things that I have, the things that I know of, is not necessarily the things that I need to have and I need to know. We can expand, we can be inclusive, we can be broader. Basically, that makes you happier, to understand why people, in the Caribbean talk this way to certain things and why we do it. And if you have that tolerance, I think you would be a better person. You would be a happier person. So basically, I would say explore. Go beyond the boundaries of the Midwest. Go beyond the boundaries of what you have now, of what you know. There might be things that are very interesting outside of your boundaries.
Well, thank you so much for that input, man. I can tell, and I said this earlier, but I can tell you're really passionate about some of your ideas as it relates to the way that we can parent and just encourage our children. I've heard you mention earlier that ultimately, the kids will travel off the island. You've traveled with your children off the island. Is that something that you encourage them to aspire towards, moving off the island or a career off the island? I mean, help me to understand the mindset of a father in Curaçao who has children. Is he fostering them towards leaving the island?
Yes, we're all different. So some people are island people, small city people. There are some people that are big city individuals, and you have to encourage people to be themselves. But coming from an island where the majority of students do part of their education off island, so you raise your kids knowing that at some point they will be leaving your house. All parents raise their kids knowing that their kids are going to leave their house, but we raise our kids knowing that they're going to leave the island. So it's a different dynamic. I encourage it because at the end of the day, we are a very small island. I think they need to explore and be exposed to everything that's out there, be prepared to expose themselves because you want the cultural shock to be as slow as possible. For example, if they have to leave at 18 or 17 to go to the United States of America, to go to the Netherlands to study, they will experience a cultural shock. Moving from a very close family knit community to an independent, individual based community is and will always be a shock, but you have to prepare them. Listen, there will be a time that you will have to do your own thing, be a number, nobody knows you, travel in public transportation, in trains and stuff like that. I encourage the exploring part, the exposing part, the learning part, the educational part of going off island for a period of time. And then after you get educated, you get to decide, okay, what type of, environment do I want to be in? Do I want to be in a big city? Do I want to go back to Curacao? Do I want to go, to a smaller, intermediate or medium-sized city? So it's all up to the person. To be very honest, I would like to have all of them back someday in Curacao, living with their families. But again, we are now a global community. It's the world has become very accessible. So I'm basically prepared if one or more of them tell me, listen, I'm a big city guy, so I'm not coming back to Curacao, if not only for vacation. So I'm prepared for that. And I will support them. I told them basically, I will be always supporting them, rooting for them, even if it's, 5,000 miles away. But yes, I encourage all of them to be their own man.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm totally blindsided because I had given thought to the fact that you're from an island. I'd given thought to the fact that there's partying on the island, so you have to father your children through that labyrinth of activity. What I had not thought about was what you just mentioned, and it does not sound like you are unique in this in terms of parent on Curaçao, in that you pretty much have to shake hands with the reality that my child is going to be leaving not just the house, but the country. I'm not quite sure that most parents have had to deal with that. Is that intimidating? Does it make your teachings feel like they have more weight, more emphasis?
Yes, it is intimidating. I'm going to give you, an insight of the realities. We are part of the Dutch kingdom, so the majority of our kids go to the Netherlands to study. In the Netherlands, kids are educated to be very independent from young. Okay, so start taking the train to go to school since 7, 8, 9 years old, and transfer out of the house 16, 17 years old. Okay, in Curacao we are very family oriented. So kids grow up in a very close knit, family environment. So the intimidating part of this is that, okay, now this kid is 16, maybe 17 years old, and suddenly you put your son or your daughter on a plane, and in 9 hours, they have to go from having this family life into the world of being alone and fending for themselves and being independent. So yes, it is intimidating, but absolutely necessary for our kids to have that exposure to the world. And you see how many of our kids, even being raised in this family oriented culture, do the transition just fine. So it is intimidating, yet I think, and most of the parents in Curacao think, that's absolutely necessary for us, for our kids, to be the best individual they can be, in the future, the best professionals. And it's simply a fact of life that we face on a daily basis.
Thank you very much for letting me feel that, because I definitely got a perspective and a feel that's never crossed my mind. And I think you eloquently put it together to allow me to kind of visualize, if that's possible, to know what it is a parent in Curaçao might feel as their children transition from childhood to adulthood. Let me go back to the beginning here. So you told me what similarities you think you may have had with your dad. As we come to a close here, what do you think would be one of the major differences, Errol, between your fatherhood style and your dad's style?
I think more inclusive in terms of, with my dad, it was kind of, this is the way we're going to do this. And I've been more inclusive in terms of, okay, guys, this is what we have. What do you guys think about? How do you guys think about this? And I've always wanted to make leaders out of my sons. My dad did that, basically, showing us how to conduct ourselves. the decision-making process and stuff like that. But I have tried to expose them to that. Okay, this is what you have. It's up to you. What do you want to do? And so I think I'm more open than my dad, and I think I was influenced by the rapid changes that I have experienced over the last 2 decades. I had to adapt. I had to be flexible. I had to talk a lot. I have to basically change the way I saw things because I could not be stuck in the 90s. Okay, so if you want to understand today's kids, you need to be flexible. And I think I am more flexible with my sons now than my dad was with me. But I've been forced to do so because the last 2 decades have seen more changes than 100 or 200 years before that. I had to make that transition of being that very conservative kind of dad into, being a dad that my kids would want to listen to want to talk to, and even sometimes want to go out with. So if not, you would not be able to, penetrate the wall. I have a certain view of things, of life, of the world, and they have another view of things, life, the world. For me to be able to penetrate that wall, I needed to be a more open, more inclusive. It's a constant give and take and change and adapt. And at the end of the day, when you want to raise an independent, resilient, inclusive, a young man and wanting him to be his own man, you must be prepared to deal with that man that you have assisted in creating. Most of the times we want to do this and that, and we are not ready for the consequences that we ourselves have done. So basically, I've opened up. I have been very flexible, strict in some things, and yeah, I have mellowed down in other areas. I always try to correct when I'm going. So it's kind of a trial and error type of education. So with the hope that at least I get to talk to them first. So that's very important before some other kid or some other person with a negative influence get that access. So I think I have that opening that they are very open to me. Like, hey, Dad, I have this problem. What do you think? Even sometimes if they know that I'm going to get angry, they know that they can always come to me first, and they know that I will always be there, whatever the consequences. I will always be there because that's my motto.
So, do you think that what you said earlier about being flexible in order to understand played a significant role in them being able to feel comfortable in coming to you directly about any particular thing?
Yes, I really feel that.
I had a dad on the show not long ago, and he talked about, he was an older gentleman. He was like 71. So he was a sage for dads, basically. But he talked about how one of the things that his late wife constantly said to him and to the kids is that, look, this is your castle. You come home. Anything you experience, anything that you go through, any hardships, challenges, difficulties, you just make sure you come home. And she made it a point to make home feel like, okay, safe. It's home base. I'm good. And so it sounds like your children are able to come to you. Something went terribly wrong, but they don't have to feel like they have to hide. It sounds like you've got a pretty open communication with your children. Is that the case?
Yes, basically, this is their castle. This is their safe haven. I've always talked to my kids very openly about the mistakes I have made because I don't want them to make those same mistakes. I want them to learn from my mistakes. So I've been open in terms of even sharing mistakes that maybe I wouldn't share with no one else, just for them to see. Okay, I have struggled at some point as well. There's nothing bad with struggling. The most important part of struggle is you need to learn from those struggles and you need to come back stronger than when you struggled. So that's why I always tell them you need to be adaptable. You need to have a fallback position and let me be your fallback position. If I can help you, there's no one else that will be helping you or assisting you better than your dad. Because at the end of the day, a dad is always a dad.
Without question, without questions. We don't have a choice. We have to adapt. Well, listen, Errol, I want to express my sincere appreciation to you for, first off, sharing some real valuable insights with us today, but also, the most important commodity that we have is time. And the fact that you would share some of that with the Dadography podcast and our listeners is truly, truly appreciated, man. No doubt. Without a question, we have got a ton of insights, food for thought, contemplation points. I mean, it's really good. So I appreciate you sharing with us.
I appreciate you asking and having me on your show. So thank you for that as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much. To all the listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of Dadography. This has been a real pleasure to spend time with you. We want to just thank you for being here. Today's fatherhood insight reaches us from the southwestern Caribbean island of Curaçao. Errol Cova is a bank executive and father of 5. He suggests 1, communicate openly with your kids, and 2, walk what you talk, as children will follow your example. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Dadography podcast. Thanks very much for listening. I would, however, like to invite you to be a part of the show. Visit our website at dadography.net. Scroll down to the bottom of the page, click on the microphone, tell us your name, where you're from, and what fatherhood means to you. Remember, it takes more than DNA to be a dad.